When I found out I had breast cancer, I called my parents, hoping for the kind of support I had always imagined they'd give. Instead, I got silence, excuses, and the realization that I had always been more of an afterthought than I was willing to admit. It's funny how you think you know people until a crisis hits. Before we get started, where are you tuning in from? Are you in the middle of the morning rush or on a late-night drive? Drop a comment below. You're about to hear everything that happened after I made the choice that changed everything. I'm Emily, a single mother in my early 40s, and I had always prided myself on my independence. I had raised my son Jake mostly on my own, working full-time as a nurse, doing everything I could to ensure he grew up in a stable home. Things were never easy, but we managed. But when my doctor gave me the diagnosis, everything changed. I wasn't prepared for how quickly my life would spin out of control, and I definitely wasn't prepared for how my parents would react. I called them as soon as I left the doctor's office. My heart was heavy, knowing what I was about to say, but I needed them to be there. The words came out in a rush. I have cancer. It's breast cancer, and I'm starting treatment soon. I held my breath, waiting for their response. What I got was a pause, followed by my mother's voice. "Oh, honey, we're at Marissa's wedding right now. Can we talk later? It's really not a good time." I stood in the hospital parking lot, my world crashing around me, holding the diagnosis in my hands like a weight that threatened to crush me. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Here I was, fighting for my life, and they were more concerned about a wedding. I wanted to scream, to demand that they drop everything and be with me, but the words didn't come. Instead, I hung up the phone and just sat in my car, trying to process everything that had just happened. The weeks that followed were a blur. I started chemotherapy, my body reacting to the poison with nausea, fatigue, and a deep sense of helplessness. The treatments were long, and some days I could barely get out of bed. But what hurt the most wasn't the pain. It was the absence of support from the people who should have been there. My parents didn't call to check in. They didn't send cards, or ask how I was doing, or even offer to help with Jake. They were too busy with their own lives. I could feel their distance growing, like a wall that had always been there, but was now more apparent than ever. The loneliness was suffocating. I had always known that my parents were more invested in their social lives than they were in me, but I never imagined it would show up like this. I was in the fight of my life, and the people who should have been there to support me couldn't even be bothered to pick up the phone. I was on my own, with Jake, the only one who truly seemed to care. The silence from my parents was unbearable. With each passing day, as my body weakened and the treatments took their toll, I felt more isolated. My phone sat silent, no messages, no calls, nothing. It wasn't just their absence that hurt, it was the realization that they were choosing to ignore the very real battle I was fighting. I had always known that our family dynamics were strained, but never did I expect to feel so invisible at a time when I needed love and support the most. Throughout all of this, there was one person who was always there, and that was Jake. He was only a teenager, but he stepped up in ways that I could never have imagined. Despite his own fears and confusion, he became my constant companion, my caretaker, my emotional anchor. While I spent most of my time in bed, fighting the physical effects of chemo, Jake was the one who kept the house running. He made sure I ate, helped me with my medication, and even tried to cheer me up by talking about his school projects or the silly things he'd done with his friends. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt that much love from anyone, let alone my own parents. I didn't expect Jake to take on the responsibility of caring for me. He should have been focused on his own life, his friends, his future. But he didn't complain. His maturity, his selflessness, blew me away. He would sit by my side at every treatment, holding my hand, telling me to stay strong. On the days when I couldn't get out of bed because my body felt like it was shutting down, Jake would crawl into bed beside me, wrapping his arms around me, and simply say, "It's okay, Mom. We've got this." But despite his incredible strength, I could see that he was hurting too. He had questions I couldn't answer and fears that I couldn't calm. One night, after another round of treatment, I was lying on the couch, exhausted and sick, when Jake sat down beside me. He looked at me with those big brown eyes, his expression filled with concern. "Mom," he said softly, "do Grandma and Grandpa even know how sick you are?" I froze. It hit me harder than I expected. I had kept the details of my condition from them. I didn't want to burden them, or more honestly, I didn't want to face the disappointment of them not caring enough to offer their support. I had told them I was sick, but I hadn't given them the full picture. Maybe I had hoped, in some small way, that they would come around, that they would step up when it mattered most. But I knew now, nothing would change. That night, Jake surprised me. He went into my desk and found a letter from my oncologist, the one that described the severity of my condition. Without saying anything, he took it, folded it carefully, and put it in an envelope with a note of his own. I asked him what he was doing, and he simply replied, "They need to understand, Mom. Jake didn't ask me for permission. He didn't need to. He was doing what I couldn't. He was taking control when I felt completely powerless." The next day, when I was too sick to leave the house, Jake walked to the mailbox and mailed the letter to my parents. He didn't look back. He didn't expect anything in return. He did it because he knew, even if I didn't, that family meant more than just blood. It meant showing up, no matter what. The days after Jake mailed that letter felt like an eternity. I spent most of them in a haze of exhaustion, trying to keep up appearances for Jake while battling my body's fierce resistance to chemotherapy. But despite the overwhelming fatigue, a small part of me felt a sense of relief. Jake had done something I couldn't. He had taken the power back. He had taken a stand in a way that I wasn't able to, and it gave me a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, this could change everything. Weeks passed, and the silence from my parents continued. I had given them the chance to step up, to make amends. But there was no phone call, no message, not even an acknowledgement that they had received the letter. They had always been like this, more invested in their social circles and their own lives than in the things that truly mattered. And here, at my lowest point, it felt like they were proving that to me once again. But then, the message came. It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a heartfelt apology. It was an email from my mother. The subject line read, "A favor." I opened it, hoping for something, anything, that showed they cared. But what I found instead left me stunned. "Hi, sweetheart," the email began, a cold and casual greeting. "Hope you're feeling okay. Marielle and Jordan are trying to plan a honeymoon to Santorini, but they are a little short on funds. We were wondering if you could contribute maybe $2,000 to help them make it happen. No pressure, just let us know. Love you." My hand trembled as I read those words. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, fighting for my life, going through months of grueling treatments, and this was what they sent me. Not a word about my health, not a question about how I was holding up, not a single sign that they had any empathy for what I was going through. And yet, here they were, asking for money to fund my cousin's honeymoon. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling a hollow emptiness inside me. It wasn't anger I felt, it was disbelief. It was like they didn't even see me as a person anymore, just a means to an end. A distant, disposable figure in their lives, only relevant when it suited them. I didn't know what to do. The hurt was deep, and part of me wanted to respond, to tell them how I felt. But I knew that anything I said would fall on deaf ears. They had already shown me who they were. That night, as I sat in the darkened living room, the weight of their words hanging in the air, Jake came over and sat beside me. He knew something was wrong without me saying a word. "Bad day, Mom?" he asked quietly. I nodded, too tired to speak. I wanted to say something, to explain how their callousness had cut me to the core, But I didn't have the energy. Instead, I just hugged Jake close, grateful that at least I had one person who understood, one person who truly cared. I knew then what I had to do. I couldn't keep waiting for them to come around. I couldn't keep hoping that they would change, that they would suddenly be the parents I needed. They had shown me who they were, and I had to accept that. The truth was painful, but I couldn't keep pretending it wasn't real. The next morning, I wrote my response. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't try to soften the blow. I simply told them that I was unable to help with their request because I was using every dollar I had to cover my own medical expenses. I didn't include any pleasantries. I just spoke the truth, raw and unfiltered. And at the end, I added something that had been building in me for weeks. You haven't called once since I told you I had cancer. That hurts more than I can explain. I hit send without hesitation. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to seek approval or love from them. I had learned that the only person whose approval mattered was mine. And I had chosen to stop waiting for a family that wasn't there when I needed them most. The weeks that followed felt like a blur of silence and exhaustion. After sending my email to my parents, I braced myself for the inevitable. I wasn't sure what I expected. A heartfelt apology, a change in their behavior, maybe even an acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. But what I got was nothing. No reply, no phone call, not even a response to the letter Jake had sent. And yet, despite the hurt, I felt oddly at peace. I had done what I needed to do. I had stopped waiting for something that was never going to come. Jake, of course, kept on being the light in my life. His strength, his resilience, was a constant reminder of what really mattered. Every day, he checked on me, made sure I was comfortable, and even did his best to make me laugh when I felt the worst. I had always known that Jake was a good kid, but in these past few months, he had proven himself to be far more than just a son. He had become my rock, and in his eyes, I could see everything I needed to move forward. One afternoon, a few weeks after my email, I was sitting in the living room, too weak to do anything but rest. I heard a soft knock at the door. When I opened it, I wasn't expecting anyone, certainly not my parents. But there they stood, my mother and father, looking awkward and uncertain, holding a small, crumpled envelope in their hands. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to say. After all, they hadn't even acknowledged my last message. We wanted to talk, my mother said, her voice tentative. I didn't invite them in. Instead, I stood at the door, my arms crossed, waiting for them to continue. We've read the email you sent, my father started, looking down at the ground as if the words were hard for him to say. And we've read Jake's letter too. He paused, then glanced at my mother, who was standing stiffly beside him. I'm sorry, my mother finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know it had gotten this bad. We didn't know how sick you really were. Her words stung, but there was a faint sincerity behind them. My father seemed to shrink under the weight of the silence that hung in the air. The apology felt like a hollow attempt to fix something that couldn't be fixed with words. The damage had been done, and I knew that no apology could erase the years of emotional neglect. But as I stood there, I realized something important. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need them to change. Jake appeared behind me, sensing the tension in the air. Without a word, he stepped forward and handed the envelope to my father. It was the same envelope that had been mailed a few weeks ago, the one with my doctor's letter, the one Jake had sent without hesitation. My father took it slowly, as if it held the weight of everything he hadn't been willing to confront. He opened it, read the contents, and his face drained of color. He sat down heavily on the doorstep, his hands shaking as he read through the letter. My mother, too, sat beside him, her face etched with guilt. I stood there, watching them, and I didn't feel the anger I had expected. Instead, I felt a strange peace. The truth had been laid bare, not in the form of accusations or fights, but in the quiet, simple delivery of a letter from a child. And it had been received, not with words, but with actions. My parents had seen what they had done. They had seen me, and that was enough. "You don't need to apologize," I said quietly, my voice calm despite the emotions swirling inside me. "I don't need anything from you anymore. Jake, he's all I need." Jake looked at me, his expression serious but proud, and I realized then that I had everything I needed in the one person who had always been there for me. My son. As my parents left that day, I didn't feel the need for them to change, for them to make things right. I had already let go of the idea that they would ever be the parents I had hoped for. What mattered now was the family I had built with Jake, the one that was based on honesty, strength, and love. We didn't need anyone else to validate that. The next few weeks were quieter. I focused on my health and my healing, surrounded by the people who had stood by me. My parents never reached out again. I didn't expect them to. And for the first time, I was okay with that. I wasn't waiting for their love anymore. I had learned to love myself, and I had learned that love wasn't about begging for it from people who couldn't give it. Love was about showing up, and I was showing up for myself, and so was Jake. That was all I needed. As the weeks passed, I settled into a new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. My life, once dictated by a hope that my parents would finally show up for me, now revolved around Jake and my own quiet determination to keep going. There was a strange peace that came with accepting the situation for what it was. I no longer needed my parents to validate me, to tell me I was worthy. I had learned to validate myself, something I'd never truly understood until I had no choice but to. Jake continued to be my unwavering source of strength. His maturity, his kindness, and his quiet, consistent love held me together in ways I couldn't have imagined before my diagnosis. We made a life within these walls, a life where the focus wasn't on what we lacked, but on what we had. And what we had was enough. We had each other. But still, there was one part of me that couldn't entirely let go of the idea of family. It wasn't about needing my parents to fix things. It was about understanding that family in its truest form should be about more than just blood. I had already come to terms with the fact that I couldn't rely on them, but I also realized that sometimes healing meant letting go and choosing what was best for me. I didn't need them in the same way I thought I did. Then came the invitation. Aunt Lena, who had always been a source of warmth and kindness in my life, called me one morning. Her voice was soft, but there was something different about it. "I'd love for you and Jake to join us for a family brunch next Sunday," she said. "Everyone will be there. It would mean a lot if you came." The words hung in the air for a moment before I could respond. My first instinct was to decline. What did I owe to a family that had left me to fight my battles alone? But there was something in Aunt Lena's voice, something genuine, that made me pause. This wasn't about my parents. This was about me and Jake and what we needed to feel whole. So I said yes. The morning of the brunch, I put on a clean blouse that still fit over my chemotherapy weight loss. It was the first time in months that I'd dressed up in something other than sweatpants or scrubs. Jake wore his favorite yellow shirt, the one with the little sunflowers on it. He looked at me as I fussed with my appearance, adjusting my blouse, and asked, "Are you okay, Mom?" "I think I will be," I said, smiling at him in the mirror. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was ready to face it. Not for them, for me. When we arrived at Aunt Lena's house, I felt a mix of nervousness and resolve. The house was small and cozy, and the air smelled of freshly baked bagels and coffee. My Uncle Bob was slicing fruit in the kitchen, and Marielle was scrolling through her phone, laughing softly. I scanned the room for my parents, and when I saw them standing near the kitchen island, Something inside me tightened. But before I could say anything, Jake was already walking toward them. His backpack bounced as he approached, and with all the courage he had, he handed my father the letter that had caused so much distance between us. The same letter that Jake had mailed weeks ago. My father took the letter slowly, looking down at it for a moment before reading it. His face drained of color, and my mother, beside him, sat down, her hands trembling as she read. There was a long silence that stretched on, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't filled with the anger or bitterness I had once expected. It was a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. And this time, I wasn't going to wait for them to decide I was worth it. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need for validation. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them to fix everything. What mattered was that Jake, my son, had shown me what love was supposed to look like all along. He had been the one who taught me how to stop waiting for the love I thought I deserved from others. Instead, he showed me that love is in the quiet moments, in the strength to stand up when you're hurting, and in the resilience to keep moving forward. As we left Aunt Lena's house that day, I didn't feel a rush of anger or regret. I felt peace. Jake and I were walking away from a family that had never fully supported us, but we were stepping into a new chapter, one where we were enough. We were complete. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop waiting for the people who never showed up. You start living for yourself. What about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult family decision that changed everything? We'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. We read every single one. If you're into real-life family drama like this, make sure to subscribe for more.